everyone, and welcome back to my nano tank. I know it has been a few weeks since I moved, and I wanted to take today to tell you guys how the move went, what went wrong, because unfortunately a lot did go wrong. So let me start off by saying that about 2 years ago was when I moved from my apartment to my husband's house, and I moved 2 tanks at that time. I did it in one day. I moved about 15 minutes away and I had no problems whatsoever. So this time, because I was moving a little bit farther, I moved about an hour away to a new house, I thought that it would be easier and better if I took 2 days and moved 1 tank each day. So on Sunday, my husband and I went to the old house to get this tank, and I was putting everything in buckets, packaging everything up, taking apart all of the electronics and everything, while my husband worked on the yard. The only thing I needed him for was to actually move this tank because I can't lift the tank myself. So I got everything packed up, everything in buckets, everything in my car, and I thought that we were making really good time. And so he put a bunch of our patio furniture in his car. I took the tank, the stand, and all the buckets in my car, and then we made the drive to this new house. So when we got to the house, I brought everything inside and started putting everything back together. First step being to get the stand in, the tank in, and get a little bit of water in, as well as the new sand, and then start putting all of the corals, rocks, and my fish back in. Well, as I was starting to put things away, I realized that the water felt a lot colder than I thought it would be. So like I said, I had done a move about 2 years ago, and that was the first weekend in April at that time, and this time it was like the second or third weekend in April, and it was actually really warm outside. It was like 72, so it was much warmer than it was the previous time I moved, so I really thought that everything was going to be okay. So as I'm starting to put everything back in the tank, I realized that the water is super cold. I think the water got down to about 66, 67, and I normally do keep my tank at about 78, 79. So I started getting worried. At that point, my main goal was to get everything just in the tank with water, with the heaters on, and I can move the rocks and the corals around later as long as nothing was touching anything that was going to sting or kill each other. My goal was just simply to get everything in the tank. So I finished around 5 p.m. that day, and at that point I was tired, I was hungry, our friends wanted to meet us for dinner, so I said, you know what, the return pump's on, the heater's on, the water's moving, everything's in the water, I'll leave it at that, let's go to dinner and everything should be fine. So then the next day, Monday, was when I went to go back to get my smaller tank, and I figured that the tank's small enough I could take care of it on my own, as well as the fact that I'm looking over there because the tank is over there, as well as the fact that my husband had work being on a Monday. I could totally take care of the small tank by myself. But before I left to go get my smaller tank, I did set up my NanoBox Duo over this tank. However, because it was earlier in the morning, it was like 10, 11 o'clock, the lights weren't going to come on because my lights typically come around 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So fine, whatever, I'll set it up, I'll plug it in, that way by the time that I go get the other tank and by the time I get home, the light will be on. So great. I went to that other house, I got my other tank, I come back, it's like 3 o'clock, and the NanoBox Duo on this tank is not on. And I'm like, what? What is going on? Which at this point, so I had gotten everything on Sunday, so the tank was without light Sunday, it was now Monday and the tank was without light. After my husband finished up work, he tried to get the tank light to turn on, he couldn't get it on. So now we're going on to almost close to 3 days without this tank having a light. So what I did was I put the bulb from the Pico tank over the 10-gallon tank, and I have the Tide from the 10-gallon tank over this tank, and my Duo is actually on its way to Nanobox to get repaired. So right off the bat, I've had an issue with the temperature, and I've had an issue with the light. I finally get the Tide on and I see that stuff is starting to die. So nothing opened at all for the first 3 days. And at that point I had gotten the light on and I could see that most of my SPS corals had either paled and or receded and or flat out died. Most of my Euphilia have been completely retracted, the most retracted I have ever seen them. In fact, most of my corals were as small and shriveled as I have ever seen them, even directly after shipping for those first 3 days. I got the light on, and then it probably took a good 4 or 5 days for things to start opening up again. And at this point we're 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out. I kind of lost track of time. But it's been a couple weeks and still pretty much nothing is back where it was before the move. The only things that are happy and healthy just as they were before the move are the 2 Gorgonians. The little one right here and then this big one in the back. But everything else has been smaller, slower to open. Yeah, it was really upsetting for those first few days that I could tell that everything was struggling. I have completely lost a few things. There are a few corals that I'm still at this point not sure if they will survive. I think the biggest downfall was the temperature, and that's totally on me. Like I said, I thought that doing 1 tank each day would help get things moving faster so that I could get everything back in the tanks faster. It was a warmer day than it was before when I had moved, and that's just what happens. So luckily, the things that matter most to me, my 2 clownfish were fine. My cleaner shrimp, he was fine. They have been with my tank since pretty much I started. They've moved twice. Location-wise, they've moved 4 times to different tanks, holding tanks. I guess it would have been possible to get heaters for all of the buckets, but I ended up using 6 buckets. So to buy 6 heaters and then somehow to try to find a way to plug them into my car, I think that would have been a little bit much, especially being that it was only an hour drive. So what was I gonna do? Stop midway to switch heaters? Because I don't think I could have plugged 6 different heaters in. I don't know. It's over and done with. Now I just have to feed and clean and hope that everything bounces back. At this point, I'm gonna turn the pump off and we'll take a little tour of the tank and I will show you what's not doing so well and what things are looking like. Okay, so here we have a top-down view of the tank. Off the bat, some of you can probably see that there are some problem areas. I have a toothbrush here that I'm going to sort of point with. Down here we have the sun coral that has basically all retracted. I'm not sure that this guy will survive. You can see I've got a grape Monty Cap as well as a couple pieces towards the front of the tank. There's one down here as well. Those have all faded as well as receded on the edges. This guy right here was a 3-head hammer. All 3 heads are gone. Here was a 2-headed hammer. One of the 2 heads are gone. This was a big 12-headed hammer. one head is gone, and there are a couple that are super small and shrinking. So I'm not sure that I will be able to save all of those guys. Frog Spawn, he's doing great. You can't see because it's far in the corner. Back that way there is another 3-headed hammer. All of the heads are gone. And mushrooms, these guys are doing okay. They are supposed to be blue, but they're sort of a purpley color. I think that's more to do with, again, using the Tide. My Duncan seems to be doing okay, but it has not opened up as big as it could. The Pallies are supposed to be greener. They sort of turned brown. This Setosa, you can barely see it because it is mostly white. I had 2 pieces about the same size. This guy is starting to get the tiniest bit of color back. The other piece completely went white and I tossed it. Here we have the Undata. This guy is pretty much dead. This unidentified acro is a purplish red color. Usually it has hints of green. Pallies back here are doing okay. This Gorgonian is doing fine. The plates are starting to puff back up again. Those guys were really receded for about a week. Hard to see back here, but this is my black sun coral. It had about 14 heads. It is now down to 6, and I am not confident all 6 will survive. Then we have this nice big red piece, which was actually a Season's Greetings green with red polyp Monty, and at least it's red, so hopefully it'll color back up. And then the neon toadstool and finger leather, they're doing okay, but again, not opening up as much as they should. Underneath the frag wreck, it's pretty hard to see, but I do have an acan. It had grown from 2 or 3 heads to probably about 15, though there are on the smaller side. That guy, again, took most of the week to pop back out and is doing okay. I think that guy will be fine. So, oh yes, and the Blueberry Gorgonian, which had started to go downhill a little bit leading up to my move. Unfortunately, because I was back and forth between the old house and the new house, I wasn't feeding my tank as much, so it wasn't doing as well as it could have been, and it is gone as well. So that is how the move went. That is how the tank is doing. Hopefully this will just sort of let other people know how I did things and what didn't work. Basically, the biggest thing you have to worry about, I think, is the temperature. And I'm not convinced that I could have done much about that anyways. Of course, if you guys have any questions about what I did for the move, about what I'm doing now that I'm at the new house, do want to mention that this room, a big problem is the light. So that's something I'm going to have to figure out and learn how to work around as I continue to make more videos. There is no ceiling light, the windows get no light, so it's pretty dim in here, especially because it is storming today. I had really hoped that it would at least be a nice day, but it's storming. So if you guys have any suggestions on how to lighten up a room for videos, that would be great. The other thing I'm wondering is, we are now on a well and septic system. I have previously been on city water, so I've had no concerns about dumping my wastewater down the toilet. Here I'm a little bit worried. I normally do 8 to 10 gallon water changes every week, but I'm not sure that I want to be dumping 8 to 10 gallons of salt water into our septic tank once a week. So if you guys have any suggestions or tips on what you guys do, those of you on well and septic, let me know in the comments, and let me know if you have any questions. I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you next time.